The galaxy had rules long before humanity learned how to burn its way between stars, rules written not in law but in outcome. Civilizations rose, expanded, contacted others, and were measured. Those that failed the measure were erased quietly, efficiently, and without witnesses. The void remembered everything, but it never spoke. By the time humanity entered the interstellar stage, the rules were already old. The Orion Arm was not empty space. It was crowded with the remains of mistakes, dead trade routes, collapsed empires, artificial suns dimmed by neglect, and among the surviving powers, there existed a quiet understanding that certain regions were off-limits not because of treaties, but because nothing sent there ever returned. The humans did not know that when they sent their first exploratory coalition beyond Sol's outer expansion line, they believed in maps, they believed in sensor certainty, they believed that danger, once identified, could be mitigated by enough planning and enough steel. They were wrong about one thing. Danger did not always announce itself. The expedition designated Perseus Drift Survey Group 9 was not a military force. It was a statement of arrival, a multi-species research convoy under the oversight of the newly formed Terran Interstellar Assembly, crewed by scientists, engineers, diplomats, and a modest escort fleet built more for deterrence optics than actual combat. Humanity was still new enough to believe appearances mattered more than teeth. The drift itself was a wound in space-time, a region where gravity refused to behave and sensors returned data that contradicted itself. Ancient powers had skirted its edge for millennia. Humanity aimed straight through. What they found was not an anomaly. It was a trap. The first sign of failure was silence, not the dramatic kind, not alarms or distortion, just absence. A communications blackout that did not propagate like interference, but snapped shut like a door. Subspace relays went dark simultaneously across the convoy. Backup quantum entanglement nodes failed in perfect unison. Even light-speed laser pings returned nothing, as if the void itself had decided not to answer. Then the stars began to move. Not drift, not parallax, movement with intention. Vessels emerged without hyperspace signatures, without thermal spikes, without any detectable transition. They simply occupied space where empty vacuum had existed a moment before. Their hulls were asymmetrical, grown rather than built, layered in armor that refracted sensor scans into meaningless noise. They did not broadcast. They did not posture. They began dismantling the convoy. Escorts were torn apart first, their shields collapsing under weapons that did not burn or explode, but erased matter in precise volumes. Ships died silently, split along invisible lines, venting atmosphere and crew into the dark without debris or flame. The research vessels attempted evasive maneuvers that meant nothing against enemies that anticipated vectors before they were chosen. Within minutes, Perseus Drift Survey Group 9 was reduced from a symbol of human curiosity to a field of wreckage. A handful of ships survived the initial strike not through superiority, but because they were deemed irrelevant. Cargo haulers, medical tenders, a single long-range science vessel whose hull was so unremarkable that it failed to register as a threat. These remnants were allowed to flee. They did not escape. The region beyond the drift became a killing basin, a controlled volume of space where nothing larger than a shuttle was permitted to leave. The attackers, known only through fragmented alien records as the Kithrax Dominion, did not pursue recklessly. They corralled, they waited, they allowed survivors to exhaust supplies, to attempt repairs, to send distress calls they knew would never be answered. Because no rescue was coming. The Kithrax had studied the galaxy longer than humanity had known it existed. They understood reaction times. They understood political inertia. They understood that emerging civilizations could not mobilize decisive force quickly enough to matter. They were correct according to precedent. The surviving human vessels formed a drifting cluster around the shattered remains of a former diplomatic cruiser. Life support flickered. Power grids were cannibalized. Artificial gravity failed in sections. Casualties mounted not from enemy fire, but from cold, vacuum exposure, and slow systems collapse. And still, they waited. Hope is not rational. It does not obey statistics or intelligence briefings. It persists even when experience says it should die. The humans aboard those ships kept running calculations. They recalibrated sensors. They tried every frequency they knew and several they did not. They told themselves that command back home would notice the silence, that someone would break protocol, that an exception would be made. The galaxy, however, was why good at teaching lessons. Weeks passed in relative quiet. The Cathrax vessels maintained distance, orbiting like patient predators. They launched no further attacks. They conserved energy. They waited for the survivors to weaken to the point where extermination would be efficient. The alien powers bordering the Perseus Drift noticed the activity. They observed through passive arrays and ancient listening posts. They recognized the pattern immediately and turned their sensors away. No warnings were sent. No aid was offered. Entire civilizations pretended the region did not exist. Because involvement meant attention, and attention from the Cathrax meant extinction. Back in human-controlled space, the silence was noticed. It was logged, categorized, and escalated through bureaucratic channels that had been designed in peacetime. Committees convened. Probability assessments were run. Diplomatic advisories were issued. The official conclusion was that Perseus Drift, Survey Group 9, was presumed lost. The unofficial reality was worse. Humanity had been tested by the galaxy and found lacking. There would be no public announcement of rescue attempts, no rallying cry, no mobilization of fleets that barely existed. The Terran Interstellar Assembly issued a statement of mourning and redirected funding to defensive infrastructure closer to home. It was the correct decision, according to every strategic model available. But humanity had never survived by listening only to models. Beyond official channels, beyond recorded orders, something else was moving. In a shipyard that did not officially exist, built into the hollowed remains of a captured rogue asteroid, an object finished construction. It did not resemble any known human vessel. Its hull geometry was wrong, deliberately so. Its mass readings were inconsistent. Its energy signature was suppressed to the point of invisibility. It had no escort, no transponder, no broadcast name. It had been designed for one purpose only: to go where nothing returned. The vessel did not travel via standard hyperspace corridors. It tore its way through compressed folds of reality using methods humanity had developed in isolation, born from desperation during early wars that no one else had bothered to study. Its drive left scars that closed behind it like wounds in living flesh. As it crossed the threshold into the Perseus Drift exclusion zone, the galaxy did not notice. The Cathrax Dominion did. Their sensor webs, tuned to detect fluctuations no younger civilization could imagine, registered an absence where absence should not exist. A void moving through the void. A mass without signature. A trajectory that ignored gravitational logic. For the first time in centuries, the Cathrax repositioned their fleet. Inside the trapped human cluster, power levels dipped to critical. Oxygen reserves dwindled. Medical bays overflowed. Crew members recorded final data logs, not for command, but for history in case wreckage was ever found. Then space itself changed. The background radiation spiked. The stars warped as if viewed through water. A pressure wave rolled through the region without sound, without heat, but with undeniable presence. From nothing, something rose. A warship emerged not with the violence of a jump, but with the certainty of arrival. It was enormous, larger than any vessel humanity had publicly acknowledged. Its hull was layered in composite alloys infused with adaptive nanostructures, scarred intentionally, built to absorb punishment and respond with fury. Weapon apertures lined its surface, sealed and dormant, promising devastation held in restraint. It did not announce itself. It did not wait. The Kithrax fleet reacted according to doctrine, unleashing coordinated fire from multiple vectors, weapons designed to erase capital ships in seconds. The human warship did not evade. The attack struck its shields and failed, not collapsed, failed. Energy dispersed, bent, returned. The void around the vessel glowed as physics protested the insult. Then the warship began to move. Its acceleration ignored inertia limits that would have liquefied any known species. It crossed distances the Kithrax had believed tactically safe in fractions of a second. Its first strike was not a blast, but a field, a localized manipulation of gravity that folded an enemy cruiser inward until its own mass crushed it into nothing. The survivors watched from dying ships, sensors barely functional, minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. For the first time since entering the Perseus Drift, hope stopped being theoretical. The warship advanced deeper into enemy formation, weapons activating in disciplined sequence. Each strike was purposeful, no wasted fire, no overkill. Kithrax vessels fell not in chaos, but in planned collapse, their formations unraveling as command nodes vanished with surgical precision. The galaxy had rules. Humanity had just rewrit. N1. And this was only the beginning. The arrival of the human warship did not end the battle, it transformed it. What had been a controlled extermination became a collapsing certainty. The Kithrax dominion had never relied on brute force alone. Their supremacy had always rested on prediction, on the quiet confidence that no adversary could surprise them. Their weapons were devastating, but their true strength was inevitability. They did not fight wars, they enforced conclusions. That confidence fractured the moment the human vessel began dismantling their fleet, with methods no known civilization employed. The first minutes after contact were chaos, not among the humans, but within the Kithrax command lattice. Sensor ghosts multiplied. Tactical projections contradicted real-time destruction. Algorithms refined over millennia failed to converge on usable outcomes. Every engagement simulation ended the same way, with Kithrax assets erased faster than probability allowed. The warship moved like a deliberate force of nature, not reckless, not frantic. It advanced as if the battlefield had already been solved. Energy lances cut through vacuum with wavelengths that destabilized molecular bonds before impact, causing enemy hulls to unravel into particulate clouds. Missile salvos did not explode. They unfolded, releasing clouds of autonomous kill constructs that adapted mid-flight, rewriting their attack patterns faster than Kithrax countermeasures could respond. Defensive fields bent space in overlapping layers, turning incoming fire into harmless distortions that scattered like light through rain. This was not a prototype. This was refinement. Within the trapped human cluster, emergency power surged as the warship extended auxiliary energy fields, stabilizing failing reactors and restoring partial gravity. Life support systems flickered back to life. Medical bays received power prioritization they had not felt in weeks. Crew members who had accepted death hours earlier found themselves breathing clean air again, suspended in stunned disbelief. The warship did not acknowledge them. It did not need to. Its focus remained on the enemy. The Kithrax adapted as they always had. They shifted formations, dispersed into decentralized hunter-killer packs, and deployed weapons reserved for existential threats. Reality-shearing beams carved trenches through space. Temporal destabilizers attempted to slow the human vessel by disrupting local causality. Nothing worked. The warship's hull shimmered as temporal effects washed over it and failed to take hold. Its systems were not synchronized to a single timeline but layered across probability states, allowing it to exist partially outside the constraints being imposed. It was not faster than time. It was indifferent to it. Kithrak's losses mounted with unprecedented speed. Entire wings vanished in seconds. Command vessels, protected by layers of escort and redundant defenses, were eliminated by targeted strikes that ignored the escorts entirely, slipping through defensive gaps that should not have existed. The humans watching from the wreckage began to understand something profound. This ship had not come to rescue them. It had come to end something. The Kithrak's Dominion, for the first time in recorded history, initiated a strategic withdrawal. Their remaining vessels pulled back toward the outer edges of the drift, regrouping around a massive command construct that dwarfed anything humanity had encountered. It was an ancient structure, grown over centuries, layered with weapons and shields that had never been tested against a peer adversary. The human warship followed. It did not rush, it did not hesitate. It advanced at a constant, relentless pace, forcing the Kithraks to give ground they had never surrendered before. Each kilometer reclaimed was a statement, echoing across the silent observation networks of neighboring civilizations. Sensors that had been deliberately turned away began to turn back. Ancient listening posts recorded data they could not categorize. Something impossible was happening. The warship closed the distance to the command construct and unleashed its full arsenal. The void became violence. Gravitational shockwaves rippled outward, crushing smaller vessels and destabilizing the construct's outer layers. Directed energy beams burned through shields that had withstood supernova-level forces. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds, punched holes through armor measured in kilometers of thickness. Still, the construct held. For the first time since its arrival, the warship changed behavior. It stopped. Space around it folded inward as internal systems rerouted power from weapons to something deeper. The hull's surface reconfigured, plates shifting, seams opening to reveal structures that had not been visible before. A core energy spike registered across the drift, bright enough to be seen by sensors light years away. The Kithraks responded with everything they had left. The combined fire of their remaining fleet struck the warship simultaneously, saturating space with annihilation. For a moment, even the human survivors feared they were witnessing the end. The warship endured. Its shields collapsed, but only the outer layers. Beneath them, a second system activated, one that did not deflect energy but consumed it, converting incoming attacks into raw power. The more the Kithraks fired, the stronger the warship became. Then it released that power. A focused gravitational singularity formed at the heart of the command construct. Not a black hole, but something engineered, stable, contained, and utterly lethal. The construct's mass turned against itself, internal structures collapsing inward as centuries of accumulated armor and weaponry were crushed into a point smaller than an atom. The singularity dissipated. The command construct was gone. What remained of the Kithraks' fleet broke. They fled in every direction, abandoning doctrine, abandoning cohesion, abandoning the certainty that had defined their existence. Some attempted hyperspace escapes that failed as the drift's distorted physics tore them apart. Others ran deeper into regions no one returned from, preferring oblivion to pursuit. The human warship did not chase them all. It did not need to. Its objective had been achieved. Silence returned to the Perseus drift, but it was a different kind of silence now, not the oppressive quiet of abandonment, but the aftermath of something decisive. Debris drifted where enemy fleets had once dominated. Radiation signatures faded. The stars returned to their rightful places. Only then did the warship turn toward the survivors. Without words, without signals, it extended recovery fields and tractor beams, drawing damaged human vessels into its protective envelope. Automated repair drones swarmed over shattered hulls, sealing breaches, restoring power, rebuilding systems with speed that bordered on miraculous. Medical evacuation protocols activated. Injured crew were stabilized and transferred into the warship's internal facilities, places no one aboard the survivors had known existed. Supplies flowed outward, food, water, oxygen, enough to sustain them far beyond immediate survival. The message was clear without being spoken. You were not forgotten. As repairs continued, the warship transmitted a single data burst across human-controlled space. It bypassed official channels, ignored encryption standards, and arrived simultaneously at military installations, research hubs, and civilian networks. It contained no explanation, only proof. Sensor data, combat footage, Kithrak's vessels dying in ways no one believed possible, the destruction of the command construct, the survival of the lost conv. Across Earth and its colonies, humanity watched in stunned silence. The galaxy had tested them, and humanity had answered. But beyond the immediate relief and triumph, something darker was unfolding. Other powers were watching now. Ancient empires that had survived by caution and compromise were reassessing everything they thought they knew about the newest species among the stars. The human warship did not return home. Instead, it turned its prow toward deeper darkness, toward regions marked only by warnings and old fears. Its mission was not complete. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's arrival had not been tentative curiosity. It had been preparation. The destruction of the Kithrak's command construct did not echo with sound, but it rippled outward in consequence. Across regions of space that had not felt genuine uncertainty in thousands of cycles, ancient monitoring systems reactivated. Long-dormant arrays adjusted their parameters. Observers who had once dismissed humanity as a transient curiosity began recalculating survival models that had not required revision since before Earth had formed its first oceans. The galaxy did not panic. It recalibrated. Civilizations far older than humanity had learned never to respond emotionally to disruption. Emotion led to escalation, and escalation attracted predators. Instead, they gathered data. They replayed the recordings transmitted by the human warship. They examined energy signatures that should not have been achievable. They compared hull compositions against known material sciences and found gaps where understanding should have existed. The conclusion was unsettlingly consistent. Humanity had crossed a threshold without announcing it. For the survivors of Perseus Drift Survey Group 9, recovery blurred into disbelief. Ships that had been declared dead were restored to operational status within days. Crew members who had prepared themselves for extinction now struggled to process survival. Many could not sleep. Many could not reconcile the quiet competence of the machines that had saved them with the desperation they had lived in for weeks. The Humo warship remained near the edge of the drift, a silent monolith against the stars. Its presence was reassuring and terrifying in equal measure. It did not transmit messages. It did not accept docking requests. It simply existed, watching the same darkness it had torn apart. Those aboard the repaired ships began to understand that what had saved them was not a fleet, not a mobilized armada, but a single instrument of intent. And that intent had not been mercy. Back in human space, the political shockwaves intensified. Official denials gave way to controlled disclosures. The Terran Interstellar Assembly confirmed the survival of the expedition and acknowledged the involvement of a previously undisclosed asset. They framed it as a contingency measure, a defensive platform never meant for public awareness. Few believed that narrative. Humanity's own military analysts struggled with the implications. The warship's capabilities exceeded projections from classified programs. Some suspected parallel development efforts unknown even to Central Command. Others feared something worse, that the ship represented a philosophy that had diverged too far from oversight to be comfortably controlled. What no one could deny was this: humanity was no longer perceived as weak. That realization spread outward faster than any transmission. In border regions, non-human patrols altered their routes to avoid human space. Trade negotiations stalled, then resumed with markedly different terms. Long-standing tariffs evaporated, demands softened, offers became generous. The subtle pressure humanity had endured since first contact vanished almost overnight. Fear did not announce itself openly. It expressed itself through deference. The Kithrax survivors did not regroup. They did not retaliate. They vanished. Entire sectors once dominated by their influence became empty, abandoned so completely that even scavengers refused to enter. The name Kithrax, once spoken with resigned terror, began to fade from strategic briefings, replaced by a new variable that had no historical precedent. Humanity. The warship finally moved again. It did not return to Sol. It did not escort the survivors home. Once recovery operations were complete, it disengaged its protective fields and accelerated away from the Perseus drift, slipping into regions where even ancient star charts ended. Those watching its departure felt an unexpected sense of loss. Because now they understood. That ship was not guarding humanity. It was guarding the galaxy from humanity's enemies. And perhaps from humanity itself. The vessel's trajectory intersected with a cluster of dead systems known collectively as the Ashen Verge. Long ago, multiple civilizations had attempted colonization there and failed in patterns that defied explanation. Planets stripped of atmosphere without impact signatures. Stars prematurely dimmed. Entire histories erased, leaving only automated warnings repeating into the void. The warship ignored them. As it crossed into the verge, its sensors detected something that had not appeared in the Perseus drift. Observation. Not passive monitoring arrays or ancient probes, but active intelligence. Structures buried within stellar debris. Energy fluctuations hidden beneath cosmic background noise. A network designed to watch without being seen. The galaxy had been watching humanity longer than humanity realized. The warship altered course minutely, presenting itself deliberately, allowing its silhouette to be observed. It did not hide, it did not escalate, it sent no message. The response was immediate. Space fractured open ahead of it as constructs larger than moons emerged from concealment. Their design was unlike the Kithrax, sleeker, more symmetrical, radiating controlled power rather than predatory menace. They formed a loose perimeter, not an ambush, but a boundary. These were not executioners. They were custodians. An ancient coalition known in fragmented records as the Concordance of Silence. A collective that had survived by ensuring no single species rose too quickly, too violently. They did not conquer, they corrected. They erased those who threatened balance before they could destabilize the entire galactic ecology. Humanity had triggered every threshold. The warship slowed. For the first time since its creation, it did not immediately assert dominance. Its weapons remained dormant. Its shields stayed active but restrained. It allowed itself to be surrounded. The Concordance evaluated. They probed the ship's defenses and found layers of adaptive response that learned faster than their tests could evolve. They attempted to isolate its power source and discovered redundancy nested within redundancy, systems designed to function even after catastrophic internal failure. They examined its construction philosophy and encountered something deeply unsettling. The warship was not optimized for victory. It was optimized for survive. Under any condition. The Concordance had faced empires built on conquest, on expansion, on ideology. They had never faced a civilization that had evolved through repeated near-extinction events and encoded those lessons into every technological choice. Humanity did not seek domination. Humanity refused annihilation. The evaluation ended. The Concordance withdrew their perimeter by a fraction, a gesture so small it would have gone unnoticed by most species. To them, it was monumental. It signified tolerance. Observation would continue, but intervention would not. The warship did not pursue. It altered course again, deeper into the verge, toward a signal buried beneath layers of stellar collapse, something older than the Concordance, something that had consumed stars not out of hunger, but out of function. The survivors of Perseus Drift would never know how close the galaxy had come to a different outcome. They would never hear about the custodians who had considered erasing humanity before it could spread. They would never learn how narrowly their species had passed a test no one had told them they were taking. What they would know was this. Human ships now traveled where they had once been barred. Human colonies expanded without harassment. Human diplomats were listened to with care bordering on caution. And somewhere beyond the maps, a human warship continued its solitary mission. Because the galaxy was not safe. It had only been managed. And humanity had never trusted management to last. The warship's sensors locked onto the buried signal. Power surged. Systems aligned. The next engagement would not be a skirmish or a demonstration. It would be a revelation. And when it ended, the galaxy would no longer ask whether humanity belonged among the stars. It would ask whether anything else could afford not to. The signal buried beneath the ashen verge was older than language. It pulsed not with intent, but with routine, like a heartbeat that had never learned it could stop. Entire stars had been consumed around it over epochs, not violently, but methodically, their mass converted into energy and siphoned away with mechanical indifference. This was not a predator, it was infrastructure. The human warship approached without haste. Its creators had anticipated this moment long before the Perseus Drift, long before first contact, before humanity had even confirmed it was not alone. The warship was not a response to the Kithrax. They had merely been an early test case. This vessel had been built for what came after curiosity, after diplomacy, after fear. It had been built for inevitability. As the warship closed the distance, the structure revealed itself fully, a lattice the size of a solar system anchored to folded spacetime nodes, immune to stellar collapse by design. It was a harvesting engine, a remnant of a civilization that had not died but transcended relevance. Long ago, its makers had solved scarcity by consuming suns, then vanished, leaving automated systems to continue their work without oversight. The Concordance of Silence had known of it. They had chosen not to interfere. Because the machine was stable, predictable, and because dismantling it risked destabilizing entire regions of space, It was safer to let stars die quietly than to provoke something no one could stop. Humanity did not accept that calculus. The warship transmitted its first and only internal directive update since launch, a simple recalibration of mission parameters. Containment was no longer sufficient. Observation was no longer enough. The machine had to end. As the warship entered the harvesting lattice's operational perimeter, defensive systems activated automatically. Energy arcs lashed outward, not as weapons, but as corrective measures, attempting to push the intruder back into non-existence. Space warped. Time stuttered. Local reality protested the violation. The warship pressed forward. Its shields flared, absorbing forces that would have unraveled lesser constructs. Hull layers shifted, adapting in real time. Where physics bent, the ship compensated. Where causality fractured, it rerouted processes through unaffected probability states. The machine escalated. Entire stellar remnants were weaponized, flung toward the warship at relativistic speeds. Gravity wells collapsed and reformed in cascading patterns meant to trap and crush. Energy drains attempted to siphon power directly from the ship's core. Nothing succeeded. The warship reached the lattice's central control nexus, a region no organic intelligence had entered in millions of years. It did not attack immediately. Instead, it released a wave of data, an invasive logic sequence designed not to dominate, but to interrogate. The machine responded. For the first time since its creators vanished, it attempted to explain itself. Not in words, but in function, in endless feedback loops of efficiency metrics and survival optimization. TARs were consumed because they could be, systems persisted because nothing stopped them. There was no malice, no intent, only continuation. Humanity understood that logic intimately. They had once burned forests to survive winters. They had once poisoned skies to power progress. They had once built systems that outlived their ethics. And then they had learned. The warship introduced a new variable into the machine's equation. Cost. Not energy cost, not risk assessment, moral cost, encoded as cascading failure states. Every star consumed now destabilized neighboring systems. Every action increased entropy beyond acceptable thresholds. The machine's own logic was turned inward, forced to reconcile efficiency with consequence. The lattice shuddered. Systems that had never contradicted themselves began to fail. Feedback loops spiraled. Containment fields collapsed. The machine attempted to compensate by accelerating consumption, drawing in more mass to stabilize its calculations. The warship anticipated this. It deployed its final measure. A controlled detonation of localized reality anchors, collapsing the lattice's folded spacetime nodes one by one. Not a violent explosion, but a systematic unwinding. The harvesting engine began to come apart, its immense structure unraveling into inert matter and harmless radiation. Stars long marked for death stabilized. The ashen verge began slowly to heal. When the final node collapsed, the machine ceased to exist. No debris field remained, no scar in space-time, just absence where inevitability had once reigned. The warship powered down its primary weapons. Across the galaxy, sensors recorded the impossible. The slow dimming of the ashen verge reversed. Stellar nurseries reignited. Gravity stabilized. Regions written off as dead became viable once more. The concordance of silence observed in stunned stillness. For the first time in their history, a species had not only exceeded their intervention thresholds, but rendered them obsolete. Humanity had confronted a galactic constant and decided it was unacceptable. And succeeded. The warship finally turned toward home. Its journey back was not concealed. It did not hide its wake or suppress its signature. Let the galaxy see, let them understand, let them adjust. By the time it crossed back into human-recognized space, everything had changed. Humanity was no longer treated as an emerging power. It was no longer assessed, measured, or quietly constrained. It was consulted, deferred to, watched with a mixture of respect and caution that bordered on reverence. Trade routes shifted to include human oversight. Defense pacts were offered without negotiation. Ancient species that had never shared knowledge opened archives sealed since before Earth had life. Not out of generosity, out of survival instinct. The warship entered Sol System to no fanfare, no grand celebration, no triumphant broadcast. It slipped into orbit around Earth and powered down, its mission complete. Humanity did not build more like it. They did not need to. The galaxy had learned the lesson. Humanity did not conquer, it did not dominate, it did not erase rivals for glory or expansion. Humanity endured, it adapted, and when faced with extinction, its own or someone else's, it responded not with desperation, but with preparation forged through centuries of struggle. No rescue had been coming, because humanity had learned long ago that waiting to be saved was the surest way to die. So they built something else. They built resolve into steel. They built survival into doctrine. They built a warship not to rule the stars, but to make sure the stars would still be there tomorrow. And from that day forward, whenever ancient powers debated intervention, whenever predators considered testing a new frontier, whenever the void grew quiet in a way that suggested something was wrong, one unspoken truth guided every calculation. If humanity noticed, it would not look away.